introduce yourself to us, and that is your name, your occupation, and where you're living.
Okay. Hi there, I'm Dr. Robert Sprackland. I presently live in Alexandria, Virginia, although I get around to an awful lot of places. And by, 50 years now, I have been a herpetologist. I study reptiles, particularly lizards, which to me are just miniature dinosaurs. So that's who I am. Okay.
So take me back. Before, I want to hear all about your credentials, your degrees, where you studied, but before that, tell me what got you involved in this in the first place?
Okay. My family literally got me born into the American Museum of Natural History in New York, which in my opinion is still the greatest natural history museum on the planet. My grandfather started working there in 1927 as a guard, managed to get a job before the Great Depression and kept that. Then 1936, my aunt began working there, his daughter. It's also the year that the Herpetologists League was formed. And subsequent to that, my mother, my father, two uncles, and at least one cousin that I know of have worked there. And I literally started going to the museum before I was born. My mother was carrying me up until about a week before she stopped carrying me. And my very earliest recollection in life was being in a stroller and looking up at the statue of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I fell in love right there, right then. I was imprinted, like you see about Conrad Lorenz and the little ducks, and the little ducks go following him because they imprint. For me, it was the dinosaur. From that moment, that's family. I'm related to that thing. And a few years later, well, literally 2 years later, after I started learning how to read, looking at pictures, and spent more time going to the museum, my fascination with dinosaurs kind of bloomed into, sort of a monster of a plant. My snowballing interest picked up insects and fishes along the way. And then on Easter Sunday, when I was 4 years old, my aunt brought me as a present a book about reptiles and amphibians. She thought, in her haste, that it was another book about dinosaurs, but it wasn't. And so as I was reading, I noticed that the descriptions of these things were in the present tense, not that they lived in, but they live in. And I brought this to the attention of my mother. She says, "Oh, that's because these are reptiles. They're still alive." Boom! I was hooked. And from that point back, there's no looking back. I still love other critters, but the reptiles are the ones that just grabbed me at that particular moment, and they've propelled me through life. Footnote.
So brag to me a little bit. Tell me about your credentials. Like, where did you go to school? What have you studied exactly? Where are you a graduate of? Kind of give me a list of your credentials in this field.
Well, when I was at the museum as a teenager, 2 of the 3 curators had gone to the University of Kansas. And so that plus the fact that a professor at the University of Kansas had written a monograph about what was my favorite lizard at the time, I decided that's where I was going to go. So when I was 18, I managed to get to the University of Kansas. And I studied both zoology and paleontology. And that was delightful because I had some really wonderful professors. After that, I realized that, well, 2 things. That if you're going to stay in the academic field, you've got to expect to be doing some teaching. And if you're going to be doing some teaching, it might be nice to do a good job at teaching, because despite the credentials, an awful lot of people who have an awful lot of little gray cells that know what they have in their head don't communicate it very well. So the next thing I did was work on a master's degree in education, science education, and then after that I went back, got my master's in biology, and then I got a fellowship to go study at the University of London, where I did my PhD, and then I did my postdoc at the National Museums of Scotland in Edinburgh, where I was, well, 2 things. I was the only staff member, scientific staff member, who actually was Scottish. Everybody else was either British or German. And the other thing is I was the first, because of the National Museum, I was like the first national herpetologist. They'd never had a herpetologist in the museum since 1859 when they started the place. So I had the whole reptile collection. People had been sending reptiles, collections there, especially in the 1800s. And I had this huge collection of reptiles to go through. I was in, I think they say pig heaven, hog heaven, one of those Midwestern phrases. But that was definitely a wonderful thing happened there. There is a species of lizard called a giant gallywasp. It looks like a big skink, but it's big, but it's not a skink. And they went extinct, probably in the middle 1800s. And the number of preserved specimens that people had picked up along the way and managed to get into jars in the museums before they became extinct was very few. And so one of the great discoveries there in this museum that no herpetologist has been going through, and one day I go through a jar, and there's this jar that specimens that had been sent from Jamaica. and they'd actually been sent by the person who had described this thing in the first place. And we had a beautiful specimen of this giant galley wasp. Sadly, it's dead, but it was in excellent condition. And you know, the fact that you don't normally get a dead animal, extinct animal in the flesh like that. You know, for herpetologists, that's almost as exciting as finding, say, a tyrannosaur in the flesh outside, frozen in the snow. So that was really neat. Even in Scotland, you can make great discoveries.
So let me ask you this. What is it about herpetology that you're so passionate about? What kind of keeps you going? Because what are you doing today? You're not teaching anymore, are you?
Well, no, not at the moment. I've had
What is it about herpetology that is keeping you so passionate and active in the field?
Well, as I was growing up, I realized, sadly, that certainly back then, reptiles had a very bad reputation. They were seen, you know, snakes were these evil things. People were afraid of them. When you would see animals on the roadkill, sometimes you could see that people would swerve to kill them. My mother was very good. She let me keep almost anything I wanted in the house, but one day I traded a pine snake for a bat that a friend caught in the attic. That's where she drew the line. I had to go back the next day and trade the bat back for the snake. But what I decided was that here's this underrepresented group of beautiful animals, extremely adaptive to a variety of environments. There's more variety in reptiles than all the other land animals put together. Their shapes, their sizes, the things that they can do. And I decided as a child to be their ambassador. I wanted to be someone who would go out and explain them and show them for the beautiful things that they were, marvelous creatures that they are. And so that's what I started doing at a very young age. I started writing. I wrote my first articles when I was 15. I wrote and sold my first book when I was 18. I've been writing ever since then. I've been doing field work ever since then. I've visited most of the great museums of the world to study them. And I still try to work as their ambassador. Back in the late 1980s, for example, there was a tremendous schism between the so-called academic herpetologists in the museums and some of the zoo people who thought they were academic, and then the private community, which also included some of the zoo community. And these groups weren't talking to each other. And a lot of what we were learning about the ability to keep the animals alive and how they reproduced, and in almost any basic data, except here's the animal, it's found there, stab it, put it in a jar, was coming from the private community. But they weren't talking to the academic community because the academic community wouldn't return their phone calls. It was really hostile. And so one of the things I started doing, because I'd been trained in the academic area, but I have an insatiable thirst for information. And so despite what I was seeing around me, I never grew up with the idea that there were barriers. To me, it wasn't he's in a museum, he's in a zoo, he's a university, he's a private collector. It's like he's got these animals, he's got these animals, she's got these animals, they've got these animals. I can talk to all of them. And I did. And from the very beginning, I was able to assume, you know, a perspective from all these different people and accumulate data. I helped set up the first magazine that included reptiles as a regular thing, which became, within a year of that, there were 2 reptile magazines, one of which I became the associate editor for, the other one I was a columnist for. And at the World Congress of Herpetology, for example, in 1989, I was able to go around. I'd already gotten enough of a reputation that I could go around to people I'd never met before, and I had a petition. Several of us had gotten together, and we decided to set up a petition saying that since almost everybody in the professional community, the academic community, began by collecting tadpoles and lizards and snakes and turtles in their backyard or keeping pets, that we should acknowledge the tremendous contribution that both the amateur level keeping has done, because it gets us into the field. You have one of these as a pet, you're not afraid of it anymore. And the fact that so many of the amateurs were making contributions that the zoo people were, you know, trying to get. How did you breed those guys? How come you're keeping them alive longer than we are? And we set up this petition to get the Congress of Herpetology to approve a resolution saying that we acknowledge and we encourage and so on. I could walk around almost anybody at that conference and I would say, I need some help here with this resolution I want to have the Congress pass. And people would say to me, give me the paper, Robert. And I'd say, don't you want to know what it's about? And they said, no, we trust you, we'll sign it. And I like that. That's the kind of reputation I worked my whole life for. I still have. I'm very proud of that. I still have the original pass-around sheet of signatures. We didn't pass that Congress, but the next one in Australia, it passed with an overwhelming majority. That's the kind of thing.
Let me ask you this then, Robert. What is it about you? What is it about you that sets you apart from other herpetologists and professors? What is it about you personally?
besides my sterling personality? Well, let's see. I think what works for me is that I don't ever judge anybody by anything I've heard prior. I assume that if somebody is interested in the same thing I am, that it's worth at least listening to see what they know, what they're willing to share. I always approach somebody with the idea that I want to learn, and try to. And then, because of the contacts I have, one of the things that I'm extremely well known for is putting people together. During the second season, I have a friend who did a TV show for Animal Planet, and when they went into the second season, he sent me an email saying his producer would be in touch, and then his producer was in touch saying, we need to set up a whole second series. Can you give us some ideas of some people who are actively doing work that might, be amenable to a film crew? And that's when I was able to help set up an entire season working in Papua New Guinea, where I was doing my work. And it turns out that was a very popular season. The show that we did together was the most popular one that he shot, and I'm proud of that. And it's because I can get on email or pick up the phone and talk to almost any of my colleagues, whether or not we've met. They know me, they know my reputation. I work hard to make sure that people know that I'm fair. I give credit when somebody helps me. I give them credit, whether it's in a book of mine or publication. They get credit. I have no problem sharing credit because, what I said earlier, I'm the ambassador for the reptiles. I'm not in this for me or fame or laugh, the big money involved. I'm in this for the animals, and as long as we, whoever we are working towards that end, I can work with them, I can cooperate with them. I think those people see it, and that makes them willing to cooperate. And so, they say politics makes strange bedfellows. You'd be surprised at some of the people I've managed to get to work together willingly and excited about it because I was the one that showed them they're both interested in the same thing, and they both have information that can be shared. And I think that's a feature that makes, my passion jumps all over that, and they see it. And they know I'm not going to screw them over, that I'm not going to set somebody up to fail.
And you're passionate and you're knowledgeable.
I think so. I try to stay knowledgeable. I know that there's always something else to learn. And for that reason, many years ago, I started expanding my horizons and looking not only at different animal groups, but also different aspects. I started off as an evolutionary biologist doing systematics, and that took me into ecology, and that took me into biogeography and physiology, and I've become, the last 10, 12 years, I've become a very holistic zoologist, and the projects I'm working on now are exactly that. They're holistic. I'm doing one on long-necked dinosaurs. I've been working on a book on this subject, and it occurred to me from what I knew with my experience with submarines from way back that the model of how long-necked dinosaurs have been portrayed in books by the expert, it was wrong. It didn't jive with any physics we knew regarding submarines and pressure and weight dispersal and so on. So, there I'm taking submarine mechanics and applying it to extinct animals. Or one of my favorite projects, one that I'm still working on the details with now, I'm very involved in, is called Third Eyes, Saurians, and Scandinavian Suicide. And that probably would take a little while to go into explaining that one, but it's the kind of thing that I used to do in my lectures too, and would help my students see how a variety of things are always involved in any subject. You can't really separate things out like you do in a dissection, that whatever is involved here, it's going to have ramifications there and there and there. And so that's what I mean when I say I become a very a gestalt, a very broadly integrated type of zoologist.
Wonderful. All right, great. You are all done.
Oh, well.
You can go ahead and stop the camera.
Oh, we can stop the camera?
Okay, push the button. That same button, huh?
Same button.